Okay, yeah, I made a few notes. I guess the first thing is setting off the week. We had a change in Chinese regulations.
Nice.
Greg will be able to fill me in with the details, I'm sure. But the impact is that they changed their reserves, the requirement for reserves in the banks, and it released a whole bunch of liquidity into the market, into the Chinese market, to the scale of about $142 billion in liquidity. So that was the massive rally up in China. I think that was Monday. And because everything is relative, we're looking at a US dollar chart. The dollar chart actually made a new low. So it keeps making these lower lows and lower highs. So that trend that we talked about maybe the last couple of weeks has not been reversed. I couldn't tell you. You'd have to ask Simon if that's going to change, but I couldn't tell you if it's going to change or reverse. I don't see, at the moment, I don't see a reason why it would change that downward trajectory.
So the interest rate should have had an impact, right?
Well, the interest rate is actually dollar down, risk assets up, right? So it's Bitcoin up and dollar down.
Okay.
That's the interest rates. Even to the extent that the President Trump has been lamenting on the impact of sanctions and the dollar strength. I think that was in the last couple of days. So everyone is well aware how weak the dollar is. But of course, that's only relative because it's stronger than a lot of other currencies. It's just weaker than the S&P. I think I have a chart here of the S&P making new all-time highs. I believe they're all-time.
Can you scoot that up so we can see the
highs
scale?
And people are talking about going over $6,000. See the time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a chart since May. It's April, gone way up. Way up.
Okay, can we just elaborate a bit there? So when the interest rate got cut and it came down, that was good news for risk assets. Good news for Bitcoin, crypto, and everything else.
Yes, the cost of borrowing went down, and therefore businesses could invest more or borrow more, and relatively the strength in risk assets went up.
Okay.
Right, everyone has a bit more money to spend. They're not paying interest payments on mortgages, etc. The consensus, or the sentiment at the moment is that we're expecting another 1% rate cut by the end of the year. That's what they're still talking about. So it's still positive for risk assets, and at least until the end of the year. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not real clear. How does that impact the dollar per se?
The cost of the dollar, the strength of the dollar.
Yeah.
I haven't linked those two together, but I was talking about the sanctions, the impact of sanctions.
Right. Okay.
And the global perception, the petrodollar, the BRICS, the BRICS group.
Yeah, I was thinking more like Dixie, and what did that 0.5% cut do for Dixie? Anything? I thought you seemed to imply that it drove it down even more.
Yeah, I mean, generally, whenever a currency changes interest rates, if the currency goes up, there's more interest to put money into the currency because you make more. And if the interest rate goes down, people pull out of the currency because there's less interest. There's less money to be made on the yield. So that's kind of the
so there's less incentive to be holding dollars if your interest reward is lower, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, thank you.
If we do get this other cut coming, we can only expect Dixie to continue going down, right? We can see a catalyst for it to go down still, but maybe not something to go the other way.
unless we are in an election year, and that could change a lot of things. God knows how that's going to impact the value of the dollar and risk assets in general.
Well, I'll give you a real world example for me, not being as educated as either of you gentlemen, but I had to sign a 1-year lease today, and it was in baht, and I started to look at transferring baht because my landlady is in Hong Kong, so I would have to transfer it over in Hong Kong. So I could have done it in baht at Bangkok Bank, and I looked at the rate, and it had been up pretty high, above, I think average it was like 35 for the year, but now it's down 32, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it's been trending down, obviously. And the baht is actually very strong. So I just decided, I took the chance, I just decided to lock in at a USD rate for my mortgage instead of a baht rate, because I could potentially see that costing me more and more USD
Right.
each month.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
But I also wasn't sure if it was a smart move, because if things reverse, then okay, man, I could have paid less. But I also felt like I didn't see anything on the horizon telling me the U.S. dollar was going to stay strong. With all, in my perspective, it's BRICS. More and more countries applying to BRICS. It's more oil being sold, more energy being sold. Not using the U.S. dollar as the means of currency. So that's my layman's view on that. So
Okay.
very interesting.
And I'll just close out. We've got a couple of events happening in the rest of this week. We have US GDP being announced tomorrow night. And we also have the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, is speaking tomorrow. So there could be fluctuations in the market price. But I think most serious market commentators, they look very skeptically at the GDP. It seems to get revised up and down depending on who's in power and what influence they're trying to carry, and it is definitely a backward-looking indicator. So I wouldn't put too much weight on that one.
Okay, so that, much like we talked last week, there's what they expect it to look like, and then as long as it's within expectation, everybody's okay.
Right, everybody's happy and they carry on. Yeah.
What is this expectation? Do you know?
I think the expectation is like 3%.
Okay.
Don't quote me on it. I think it's about 3%, but again, it's all relative. So when you've got inflation, which is supposedly 9% or 20%, depending on who you listen to, 3% doesn't really make any difference, right?
No.
Yeah. The last chart I'm sharing here is Bitcoin. My expectation is to revisit the highs of the range at about 68 before we start.
What do you have this on candle-wise, Dan? I can't see the top there.
This is a daily candle, sorry.
Dailies, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I think it'll continue up until it hits resistance at about 66, 68 before any retracement. But the longer term view is, if you look at back in the history, every month that September has been green, October, November, December have been absolutely parabolic. So October is always a good month in history. And we're expecting October, yes, October.
And September is often the worst month.
Yep.
September is normally the worst, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.